The lullaby's echo, a millionaire's silent park. Warning. What you're about to hear is a tale woven with threads of deep loss, a chilling mystery, and a fragile hope found in the most unexpected place. A man haunted by a past tragedy, and a child with a song that defies all logic. Before we uncover this incredible truth, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that like button if you're ready to explore secrets hidden in plain sight. And trust me, you'll want to comment your thoughts below as this journey unfolds. Part 1. The Executive and the Enigma. Every morning at 6, Central Park in Portland, Oregon, began to pulse with life. Runners, vendors, dog walkers. Among them, one figure always stood out, Thomas Belmont. His athletic wear was impeccable, wireless earbuds firmly in place, his stride determined and unyielding. It had been his routine for years. 38 years old, CEO of a successful environmental tech company, with more money than he knew how to spend and fewer connections than he'd admit. His world was efficient, silent, and meticulously controlled. What didn't fit into that world was the small figure he'd been seeing for days on the same bench, under the same tree. A little girl, perhaps 7 years old, swathed in an oversized, dirty sweater, sleeping, clutching a frayed teddy bear. She didn't beg for money. She didn't bother anyone. She was simply there, invisible to everyone but Thomas. First, he ignored her. He assumed an adult was nearby, that it was temporary. But with each passing day, the girl remained in the same spot, in the same position, in the same silence. And something about it began to unsettle him. One morning, just as he walked past her, he heard a murmur. It was barely a hum, like a lullaby utterly out of place in that cold urban setting. He stopped. It wasn't possible. That melody was identical to the one Valerie, his sister, used to sing when she was young. The same one she hummed while caressing her belly, before vanishing without a trace 7 years ago. Thomas didn't move. He looked at the girl more closely. Her face was dirty, lips chapped from the cold, eyes closed. The bear clutched tightly to her chest. He took a step towards her, then another. He knelt down to her height. "Are you alone?" he asked in a low voice. The girl barely opened her eyes. She wasn't startled. She looked at him as if she knew him from somewhere far away. "My mommy said she'd come back," she whispered, and closed her eyes again. Thomas felt a knot in his stomach. He wanted to say more but didn't know how. He wasn't a man who knew how to talk to children or even adults, really. He stood up and walked away, though his mind was no longer on his run. That same afternoon, in his glass office on the 17th floor, with a panoramic view of the city, he couldn't concentrate. Performance charts, calls, emails, everything seemed absurd compared to that image. A little girl sleeping alone on a bench, singing his missing sister's song. "Mr. Belmont?" His assistant's voice came through the intercom. "The investor meeting starts in 10 minutes. "Cancel it," he replied without thinking. "Reschedule for next week." The silence on the other end was long. "Is everything all right?" Thomas didn't answer. He had already made a decision. He didn't know what he was going to do about that child. He didn't know if he was imagining things. But something inside him, something that had been dormant for years, had awakened. And he couldn't ignore it. Leaving the building, he saw his reflection in the glass doors. Elegant, perfect, empty. As he descended the stairs to the parking garage, an idea slowly began to form in his mind. It wasn't a plan. It wasn't a solution. It was a question that wouldn't let him go. What if it wasn't a coincidence? That night, for the first time in a long time, he didn't sleep. Part 2, Alma's Secret. Thomas arrived at the park before sunrise. The city was barely waking, and the morning air was damp and cold. He walked slowly, hands in his pockets, heart pounding, though he wouldn't admit it. As he neared the bench, he saw her again. The girl was in the same position, body curled up, sweater pulled over her head, teddy bear clutched to her chest. He stopped a few feet away, unsure what to do. For a moment, he thought about leaving. But then, the girl slightly lifted her head. She said nothing. She just looked at him. "Hello," Thomas said, softer than the day before. What's your name? The girl looked down. Alma, she answered, barely moving her lips. Thomas nodded slowly. He sat on the edge of the bench, leaving space between them. He didn't want to scare her. How old are you, Alma? She didn't respond. She just hugged her bear tighter. Where's your mommy? He asked, already knowing the answer. She told me she'd come back, to wait here. Alma murmured, her voice trembling. She said she wouldn't be long. Thomas swallowed. He wanted to believe the mother would return, but deep down, he knew it wasn't true. This child was alone. And your daddy? Alma shook her head. Silence. He pulled a granola bar from his pocket. He offered it to her. Alma looked at him. She hesitated for a moment and took it with small, dirty hands. She carefully opened it and began to eat it in slow bites, as if afraid it would run out. Thomas watched her in silence. Alma's face was pale and she had deep circles under her eyes for her age. There was something in her eyes that disarmed him, a mix of resignation and hope that felt unbearably familiar. Have you ever been to school? He asked. My mommy taught me at home, she replied, still chewing. Do you know where your mommy lives? No. And any relatives? Do you have aunts, uncles, grandparents? Alma shrugged. Thomas leaned back slightly and looked at the sky, which was beginning to turn orange. For a moment, he thought about calling the police or social services, but something in him resisted. This child didn't need to be taken away by strangers. She needed understanding, a familiar face, someone who wouldn't disappear. Would you like to come with me for breakfast? He asked carefully. Alma looked at him with distrust. I don't go with strangers. Thomas managed a small smile. You're right. I'm Thomas. I work nearby. I run in this park every day. And, Alma, I don't know why, but when I heard you singing the other day, it reminded me of someone very important to me. Alma looked down again. My song. Yes, my sister used to sing that song to me when we were kids. She didn't respond, but her fingers fiddled with the edge of the pendant hanging from her neck. It was a small, worn metal heart. Did your mommy give it to you? Thomas asked. Alma nodded. He looked at it more closely. It was identical to the one his sister Valerie used to wear. Identical. The same design, the same wear. A shiver ran down his spine. What's your mommy's name, Alma? The girl thought for a second. Valerie, she replied. Thomas's world stopped. Valerie. He hadn't heard that name in years. He had avoided saying it, even thinking about it. Remembering her was too painful. Her disappearance had been a wound that never fully closed. The police found no traces. There were no calls, no clues, no goodbyes. Just a confusing note and then silence. He turned to Alma, trying not to project his anxiety. Do you remember your last name, Alma? She shook her head. My mommy called me Alma, and she told me stories before bed. But then, not anymore. Thomas tried to remain calm. He didn't want to scare her. But if it was true, if this child really was Valerie's daughter, he needed answers. And he couldn't get them just by asking questions on a park bench. He pulled out his cell phone and quickly texted Sarah Jenkins, his trusted friend and social worker. Sarah, I need you to see something urgent. It's about a child in Central Park. Can you come now? He put the cell phone in his pocket and turned back to Alma. Would you like to take a short walk? To a place where you can be warm with real food. I won't force you, only if you want to. Alma hesitated. She looked at him with narrowed eyes, assessing his sincerity. Then she nodded. Slowly. But only if I can bring Teddy. Of course, Thomas replied. He walked beside her to his car. Although she initially kept her distance, Alma slowly moved closer, as if simply having company restored something she had lost long ago. Sarah was already waiting for them in front of a small cafe not far away. She wore a blue scarf, her hair pulled back, and a look full of questions. What's going on, Thomas? It's her, he said in a low voice, pulling her a few steps away so Alma wouldn't hear. Her name is Alma, and she says her mother's name is Valerie. Sarah looked at him as if he had just told her he'd seen a ghost. Valerie? Your sister. Yes, and it's not just the name. She has a pendant just like hers. and she sings the song Valerie always used to hum to fall asleep. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to process everything. We need to find out if it's true. First, check if there are any records of this child. Then we'll see what we do. Both looked towards the table where Alma was eating with her hands, as if she hadn't eaten in days. Her teddy bear was next to her on the table, watching. What if it's a coincidence? Sarah asked, trying to be realistic. I don't know. But if I don't do anything, and it is her, I wouldn't be able to forgive myself. Sarah nodded. We'll investigate, but carefully. If she's been alone this long, something very serious must have happened. Thomas looked at her intently. And if my sister is still alive, I'm going to find her. What would you do if you were Thomas, faced with such an unbelievable coincidence? Share your thoughts below. Part 3. The Vanishing and the Return. The next few days were a mix of uncertainty and silence. Thomas tried to stick to his routine, but nothing felt the same. His mind was fixated on that child, on her words, on that name that had stirred up his entire past. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Valerie walking, 7 months pregnant, humming the same song that now came from Alma's lips. Sarah, meanwhile, had begun to move. She consulted databases, spoke with contacts at Child Protective Services, and checked files of missing or unregistered minors. Nothing. There was no information on Alma. No birth certificate. No shelter admissions. It was as if she didn't exist in the system. I don't understand, she told Thomas on a call. A child that age can't go unnoticed for so long without anyone saying anything. What if she was never registered? He asked. What if Valerie had her while she was on the run? Sarah was silent. That possibility was becoming more and more real. Meanwhile, Thomas visited the park every morning, hoping to see Alma again. He sat on the same bench, brought her something to eat, and asked her questions patiently. He never pressured her. And although she remained reserved, she no longer looked at him with distrust. She even smiled occasionally. But one morning, when he arrived, the bench was empty. Thomas thought he might have arrived too early. He walked through the entire park. He asked the street sweepers, the coffee vendors. No one had seen her, not that morning or the day before. His heart pounded. He checked hospitals, shelters, police stations. Nothing. He returned to the park at dusk, hoping to see her return. It didn't happen, and neither the next day, nor the day after that. What if she was taken? He asked Sarah desperately. It's possible, she said. Or maybe she got scared. Remember, she's lived on the street. She shouldn't trust anyone. But she was starting to trust me. She talked to me. She smiled at me. She told me her name. Sarah tried to calm him, but she was also worried. She was a small, fragile child, invisible to the system and to the world. 3 days later, just as Thomas was preparing to accept that he had lost her, his cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. Yes, are you the man who was talking to Alma in the park? A rough female voice said. Who is this? I'm Rosa. I live near the park. The girl came to my door last night. She was sick, trembling. She said she only trusted you. She gave me this number. Thomas felt his chest deflate. He didn't ask anything else. He got in his car and drove as if every traffic light was an eternity. The house was modest, an old wooden door with a hanging lamp. Rosa was waiting for him at the entrance, arms crossed. She's inside. She has a fever, she's barely eaten. She told me you were her friend, that you took care of her. Thomas entered. Alma was lying on a sofa, covered with an old blanket. Her eyes were closed, her face pale, and her teddy bear in her hands. He approached slowly, moved. Alma, it's me. I'm here. She barely opened her eyes, looked at him and smiled weakly. I knew you'd come. Thomas didn't move. He knelt beside the sofa, his gaze fixed on those small eyes that could barely stay open. He carefully stroked Alma's hair, trying not to break down. The child was trembling, her breathing was weak, and the heat radiating from her body left no doubt. She had a high fever. We have to take her to a hospital, he said, abruptly standing up. I tried, Rosa replied from the doorway. But since she doesn't have papers, they wouldn't admit her. They just gave her Tylenol. And they told me they couldn't do more without a legal guardian. Thomas clenched his fists. He didn't understand how it was possible that a sick child was treated like pending paperwork. He pulled out his cell phone and called Sarah. "Where are you?" "I found her. She has a fever. The hospital won't admit her without papers. I need your help. Now." Sarah didn't ask questions. In less than an hour, she was at Rosa's house, with a provisional file under her arm and determination on her face. "Thomas, listen carefully," she said, grabbing his arm. "There's an option. We can request an urgent protective order. You'll be named her provisional guardian while her legal situation is resolved. But I need you to be completely sure. This isn't symbolic. You'll be responsible for her to the authorities." "There's nothing to think about," he replied without hesitation. "Do it." While Sarah made calls and filled out forms, Thomas carried Alma in his arms to his car. She rested her head on his chest, without saying a word. She no longer had the strength. Upon arriving at the private hospital that Sarah arranged through her contacts, they were received without obstacles. He was treated as the guardian. She as a child who deserved urgent attention. Alma was admitted immediately. A severe respiratory infection, malnutrition, and dehydration. The doctor was clear. If they hadn't brought her that night, she might not have woken up. Thomas spent the night in a chair next to her bed, without sleeping. He watched every movement, every breath, every gesture of pain. And as he did, he remembered Valerie, her laugh, her stories, the day she showed him the small heart-shaped pendant she had bought for her baby. He remembered everything with such clarity that he found it hard to believe 7 years had passed since her disappearance. When dawn broke, Alma was still asleep. Sarah entered with a tray of coffee and an envelope of documents. "It's done," she said softly. "You are her provisional guardian. You signed last night. Do you remember?" Thomas nodded. He hadn't slept a minute, but he didn't feel tired. He felt something else. A new weight. A responsibility he couldn't and wouldn't let go of. "And now what?" Sarah sighed. "Now we have to find her mother, Valerie." Thomas looked away towards the child. If she's still alive, she needs to know her daughter is here, that she waited all this time. Sarah looked at him with a hint of sadness. "And if she's not, you have to be ready to be more than a temporary guardian." Thomas didn't respond. He just sat back down next to Alma. He carefully took her hand and murmured, "I'm not leaving, little one. Not this time." How profound is Thomas's commitment? What do you think prompted Rosa, the neighbor, to finally step in? Share your insights in the comments. Part 4. A Pendant's Secret. Alma spent the next few days in the hospital, connected to N4 and on strong antibiotics. She didn't talk much, but every time Thomas entered the room, her eyes lit up a little. He visited her every day without fail. He brought her picture books, soft cookies, and even a new brush for her tangled hair. Although the child barely spoke, his presence calmed her, and every small gesture of trust was like a silent reward. One afternoon, while helping her brush her hair, he noticed the pendant on her neck was loose. "Can I see it?" he asked. Alma nodded. He took it carefully. It was a worn metal heart, with a small crack on one side. On the back, barely visible, there was an engraving, VB. Thomas felt a chill. He knew what it meant. Valerie Belmont. "Did your mommy give it to you?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Yes," Alma said. "She put it on me before she left. She said to take good care of it, that it was from the family." Thomas swallowed. Doubts were fading. He needed proof, facts, but something in his heart already knew. That same night, he returned home and went straight to the attic. There, among old boxes and dusty folders, he found a photo. It was Valerie, pregnant, smiling with a hand on her belly, wearing the same pendant around her neck. The next day, he took the photo to Sarah. "Does this count as proof?" Sarah looked at it closely. "It's not legal proof, but it's a very strong lead. There's something else I can try." She pulled out her cell phone and dialed a number. "I'm going to talk to Clara. She was your sister's neighbor before she disappeared. Maybe she knows something that can help us." 2 days later, they were sitting across from an older woman with graying hair and tired eyes. Clara received them with distrust, but upon seeing Valerie's photo, her expression changed. "I remember her. She was a good girl, always singing. She said the baby would be named Alma, like her grandmother." Thomas tensed. "Alma?" "Yes. She also said she was scared, that the baby's father was a violent man, that she was going far away to protect her daughter." Sarah rapidly wrote everything down. Thomas only thought of the child's face in the hospital bed. "Do you know where she went? Or if anyone helped her?" "No. One morning she was just gone. She only left a box with baby clothes and a notebook of songs." "Songs?" Thomas asked. "Yes, lullabies, like that one she always sang. 'Sleep, my child. The sun is setting.'" Thomas closed his eyes. It was the same one he heard from Alma that first morning in the park. "I need to find her," he said, his voice breaking. "If she's still alive, I have to know." Clara gently took his hand. "If that child is her daughter, then your sister did everything she could to protect her. Now it's your turn." That night, Thomas returned to the hospital. Alma was sleeping, clutching her teddy bear. He sat beside her, stroked her forehead, and whispered, "I'm going to find you, Valerie, I promise." Part 5, The Confession and the Promise. Thomas wasted no time. The next morning, he hired a private investigator. He was a discreet man, a few words and a penetrating gaze. His name was Arthur Finch, and although his office didn't inspire confidence at first, Sarah assured him he was one of the best when it came to finding missing persons. "I need to know if my sister is alive," Thomas said, handing him the photo of Valerie with the pendant. "And if she ever registered a child named Alma." Arthur examined the image carefully. Then he looked at Thomas. "How long have you not heard from her?" 7 years. She disappeared without a trace, but I found this child. Her name is Alma. She has no papers. She says her mother's name is Valerie, and she wears this pendant. It's identical." The investigator nodded slowly. "I can track hospitals, rural clinics, records of similar names, old addresses, but I need time and patience. Take whatever you need. Just find her." While Arthur began his work, Thomas returned to the hospital. Alma was already better. She had regained color in her skin and even smiled a little more. Although she didn't talk much, her body language had changed. When Thomas entered the room, she greeted him with a calm, fearless expression. That afternoon, while he was reading her a story, Alma interrupted him. "You had a sister?" Thomas put the book down and looked at her. "Yes, her name was Valerie." "Did she leave too?" "Yes, she disappeared when I was younger. But I'm looking for her." Alma nodded and hugged her teddy bear. "My mommy cried at night. I heard her from the other room. Sometimes she said your name." Thomas felt his heart stop for a second. "My name?" "Yes." She would say, "Thomas, I'm sorry." Many times. He didn't know what to say. He didn't understand why his sister would apologize to him. What had she done? Or what hadn't she done? Hours later, when Alma was asleep, Sarah arrived with news. Arthur found something. What? A woman was admitted to a rural clinic 6 years ago with severe injuries from a fall. She used a false name, but the medical record matches Valerie's description. She was hospitalized for several weeks and then left without leaving an address. But before leaving, she left a note with a name, Alma. Thomas leaned against the wall. It was too much. Where was this? In a town called Willow Creek. It's 5 hours from here. I'm going, he said without hesitation. Arthur is already there. He's going to follow the trail. If that woman was your sister, maybe she left more clues. The next day, Thomas received a call from Arthur. Mr. Belmont, I found her. Is she alive? Yes. She lives in a cabin outside of town, under another name. She's scared. She doesn't trust anyone. But I recognized her. It's her. Thomas felt a knot in his stomach. Does she know Alma is alive? No. She believes her daughter died when she was hospitalized. No one gave her information, and she couldn't go back to look for her. I want to see her, Thomas said. It won't be easy. She's very emotionally damaged. But if you go, maybe she'll listen. Thomas hung up and looked out the hospital window. The sky was gray. Outside, the city continued its rhythm, indifferent. Inside, in a quiet room, slept a child waiting for her mother. And somewhere in the interior of the country, that mother was still alive, carrying a guilt that wasn't hers. Part 6. A Shattered Past. The drive to Willow Creek was silent. Thomas drove without music, windows closed, thoughts swirling like a storm. Every mile brought him closer to a truth he had feared for years. Valerie was alive, and she hadn't looked for him. She hadn't called him. She hadn't given any sign. Part of him wanted answers. Another part just wanted to hug her. The dirt road to the cabin was surrounded by dry trees and forgotten fields. When he finally arrived, he saw a small dwelling, almost hidden among the vegetation. Arthur was waiting for him beside the makeshift gate, made of uneven planks. "She's inside," he said in a low voice. "She knows you're coming, but she didn't want to come out. She just asks you not to pressure her." Thomas nodded. He walked slowly, taking deep breaths. He opened the door without knocking. The interior was dark, with old furniture, an unlit wood stove, and a damp smell. In a corner, sitting on a chair, was Valerie. She was unrecognizable. Her hair was long, unkempt. Her skin was pale with visible marks, deep dark circles. But her eyes were the same, sad but alive. "Hello, Thomas," she said, barely audible. He couldn't respond. He just stood there, unsure whether to approach or not. "I thought you'd never see me again," she added. "I thought you were dead," he finally managed to say. "I looked for you for years. I blamed myself for not having done more, for not having known." Valerie took a deep breath, holding back tears. "I was scared. Alma's father was dangerous. He followed me. He hit me. When I decided to escape, you helped me without knowing the truth. That money I asked you for was to run away. But I could never tell you what was happening. I was ashamed." Thomas looked at her, his heart aching. The pieces were starting to fit. "Why didn't you call me later? Why did you let me believe you had disappeared without reason?" "Because I almost died, Thomas," she whispered. "I fell down a ravine fleeing from him. I was in a coma for weeks. When I woke up, I didn't know where Alma was. They told me she hadn't been admitted with any adult, that they didn't know about any child. I thought she was dead, that I had lost her." Valerie's voice broke. She covered her face with her hands. "I lived with that guilt every day. Couldn't come back. I couldn't look you in the eye or look at the world. I lost everything I had left." Thomas approached, tears held back. He knelt in front of her. "Alma is alive, Valerie." She lifted her head abruptly. "What did you say?" "She's alive. I found her a few weeks ago in a park, sleeping on a bench, with the teddy bear you gave her. She has your pendant, your voice, your song. And she's still waiting for you. Every day." Valerie froze. Tears began to fall uncontrollably. Her body trembled. "No, it can't be. Where is she?" "In a hospital. She was very sick, but she's better now. She's under my care. She's strong like you." Valerie covered her mouth, sobbing. For a moment it seemed like she couldn't breathe. "I don't know if I can see her," she said, trembling. "I don't know if she'll forgive me. I don't know if I can bear to look her in the eye." Thomas held her hands. "It's not about forgiveness, Valerie. It's about love. She's still waiting for you." And in that instant, for the first time in years, Valerie allowed herself to believe that perhaps it wasn't too late. Part 7. A Mother's Letter. The sun was beginning to set when Thomas returned to Portland. He drove in silence, his heart churning, his eyes still heavy with the tears he had shared with his sister. Valerie had not agreed to come back with him. Not yet. They said goodbye with a long, painful hug, full of unspoken words. She promised to think about what he had told her, but her face was still marked by fear and shame. Before leaving, She handed him an old, worn backpack. She said nothing. She just placed it in his hands and said, "This was hers." Thomas placed it in the passenger seat without checking it, too overwhelmed to confront what it might contain. That night, back home, he waited for Alma to fall asleep. The child had already been discharged from the hospital and was resting in a makeshift room, with a small bed, clean sheets, and her teddy bear in her arms. Since leaving the hospital, she had been calmer, though she still didn't talk much. But there was something new in her gaze, as if her heart was slowly beginning to feel safe. When the house was silent, Thomas opened the backpack. Inside were small clothes, worn but carefully folded. A couple of children's drawings, made with crayons, where a woman and a girl held hands under a blue sky. And at the bottom, crumpled and yellowed, he found a notebook page with handwriting he recognized immediately. It was a letter. "Alma, my beautiful girl. If you're reading this, it's because something went wrong. I want you to know that I never wanted to leave you. If I'm not with you, it's because I did everything I could to protect you. Because I preferred you to hate me for not coming back than for him to hurt you. You are my life. No matter what happens, I will always love you. Go back to the park bench. I'll find you there. Promise. Mommy." Thomas read the letter several times, his eyes blurred with tears, Valerie's trembling handwriting, the words full of guilt, love, desperation. Everything made sense now. The promise Alma repeated every time she spoke of her mother wasn't imagination. It was real. The promise was written. It was her anchor. He carefully entered Alma's room. The child was sleeping soundly, one of her hands clutching the pendant. Thomas sat on the edge of the bed and stroked her hair. "She didn't forget you, Alma. She was just scared, but she looked for you just like I looked for her. And you found us both." Alma didn't wake up, but she moved her lips, as if dreaming. Thomas left the folded letter on the nightstand beside her bed. The next morning, Alma found it. She said nothing. She just read it in silence over and over again. When she finished, she looked out the window for a long time. Finally, she turned to Thomas, who was watching her from the doorway. "She wrote this." "Yes, she kept it for you. She always thought she'd come back." Alma hugged the letter to her chest and murmured, "I knew she hadn't forgotten me. I knew she would come back." And for the first time she cried. Not from fear, nor from sadness, but from relief. Part 8. A new silence. The days that followed were different. Alma no longer seemed so defensive. She walked around the house with soft steps, but without fear. She started helping with small things. She folded her clothes, organized her crayons, set the table without being asked. She didn't talk much, but it was clear she was more present, more connected. Thomas tried not to pressure her. He knew that any sudden movement, any ill-chosen word, could close her off again. So they moved step by step. They had breakfast together. He read stories at night. He took her to the park in the afternoons. And Alma, though she still didn't say it aloud, was beginning to feel that this place was more than just a house. It was a refuge. One afternoon, while they were playing with puzzle pieces on the living room floor, she spoke up. "Does Mommy know I'm here?" Thomas looked at her carefully. "Yes." He told her everything. "That you're okay? That you're waiting for her? Is she coming?" Thomas took a deep breath. That question had haunted him since he returned from Willow Creek. "She wants to see you, but she's scared." "Not of you," he quickly clarified. "She's scared of not knowing how to look you in the eye after so long." Alma lowered her head. She remained silent. Then she said something Thomas didn't expect. "I'm scared too." "Of what?" "That she'll see me and won't want me." The phrase broke his heart. "That won't happen, Alma. She loves you more than you can imagine. She left you because she believed it was the best way to protect you. But she never stopped loving you." The child nodded without looking at him, continuing to fit pieces together with trembling hands. That night, Thomas wrote to Valerie. He told her how Alma had read the letter, that there was no anger in her eyes, only anticipation, that she asked about her every day, but without demanding anything, only with that heavy silence that weighs more than words. Valerie didn't respond immediately. Took 3 days. When she did, her message was short. I don't know if I'm ready, but I want to see her. Even if it was from a distance, Thomas thought it over carefully. He didn't tell Alma, in case Valerie backed out. He organized the meeting carefully, without pressure. He chose the park, the same bench, the same time he had seen her for the first time. He told Alma they were going for a walk. She accepted, unsuspecting. When they arrived, the park had the typical murmur of the afternoon. Children playing, couples strolling, street vendors. Thomas bought ice cream and they sat on their bench. Do you remember this place? He asked her. This is where Teddy used to sleep, every night, she replied, as if speaking of another life. And then, from the other side of the park, Valerie appeared. She walked slowly, a cap covering her face, her arms tense at her sides. She stopped a few feet away, far enough to see her daughter without being seen. Thomas said nothing to Alma. He just let her eat her ice cream in peace. But Alma felt something. She looked up. Her eyes met Valerie's for a second. She didn't recognize her. Not entirely, but something in her body trembled. Who's that lady? She asked. Thomas looked down. Someone who loves you very much but doesn't know how to tell you yet. After that brief moment in the park, Valerie disappeared among the people like a shadow. Thomas didn't see her leave, but he knew she hadn't left out of cowardice. She just needed more time. She had tried, and although she hadn't approached her daughter, at least she had seen her. And that was a first step. What do you think Alma felt in that moment, even without full recognition? Share your thoughts below. Part 9, Healing Through Connection. Alma didn't ask about the woman in the park again. She didn't insist. She didn't pressure. But from that day on, she became quieter. She slept less, and when she did, she woke up with swollen eyes. She no longer mentioned her mother with hope, but not with anger either. She simply remained silent. A dense silence, full of things she didn't know how to express. Thomas noticed it immediately. He tried to take her for walks, cook new things, read different stories. Nothing seemed to cheer her up. One evening, while they were washing dishes together, Alma dropped a mug. The sound of the glass breaking was like an explosion in the midst of the silence. She stood still, looking at the pieces on the floor. I'm sorry, she said. It's okay, Alma, Thomas replied, bending down to pick up the fragments. But seeing that she didn't move, he looked up and found her eyes full of tears. Her fists clenched. She saw me, didn't she? Thomas froze. He didn't expect her to know with such certainty. Yes, he replied softly. She was there. She looked at you from afar, but she couldn't get closer. Why? Because she's scared. Because she believes she failed you. Because she doesn't know if you'll forgive her. Alma sat on the floor, next to the broken pieces. Thomas put the mug fragments in the trash and knelt beside her. I was waiting for her, she whispered. Every night on the bench. I didn't want to leave because she told me she'd come back. She promised. And when she finally saw me, she didn't come. Thomas hugged her tightly. She clung to his chest as if she wanted to disappear inside him. You don't have to understand it now, Alma. You just have to feel what you need to feel. You can be angry, cry, scream if you want to. I'm not leaving. Are you going to leave me too? Never, he replied without hesitation. I'm here, and I'm staying, even if sometimes I don't know how to help you. That night, Alma fell asleep on the sofa, with the blanket up to her neck and her teddy bear in her arms. Thomas sat beside her in silence. He had learned that some wounds weren't healed with pretty words or promises, only with presence, with consistency, with silent love. The next morning, when she woke up, Alma didn't mention her mother again. She helped prepare breakfast, brushed her hair herself, and even laughed softly when Thomas burned a piece of toast. But her eyes were still sad. Outside, the day dawned cloudy. Inside, the air felt a little lighter, though the pain hadn't left. It had just found a more comfortable corner to stay. And Alma, with her silence, began to build something new, not on forgetfulness, but on waiting. Part 10. A Dialogue of Healing. On Sunday afternoon, While Thomas organized some documents at his desk, Alma entered his room with slow steps. She said nothing, but held something in her hands. It was the crumpled, folded-in-four paper she had read so many times. Her mother's letter. "Can I ask you a question?" she said, barely audible. Thomas stopped what he was doing and turned to her. "Of course, Alma. Anything you want." She approached, her gaze lowered. "Why did she leave me a letter? And didn't come to look for me?" Thomas took a second before answering. "Because she thought she had failed, that she didn't deserve to see you. But I promise you, she looked for you in her own way. Life just wasn't easy for her. She was very sick, lost many things, but she never stopped thinking about you." Alma squeezed the paper between her fingers. "You saw her?" "Yes." "You talked to her?" "Yes. She told me everything that happened. She gave me this letter. She told me she kept it for you, because she thought she would come back for you someday." Alma sat on the bed in silence. Then, looking at the paper, she said, "I want to write her a letter too." Thomas smiled tenderly. "That's a good idea." He looked for a blank sheet and a pen. Alma settled at the living room table, propped up her elbows, and stared at the paper for a long time before starting. She didn't ask for help. She didn't ask what to write. She just wrote, calmly, with pauses, erasing some words and rewriting others. When she finished, she folded the sheet and handed it to Thomas. "Can you give it to her?" He nodded. "Do you want me to read it?" Alma shook her head. "It's for her, only for her." Thomas put the letter in an envelope and slipped it into his jacket without asking questions. That same night, he wrote to Valerie. "Alma wrote to you. I didn't read it. She says it's for you. If you're ready to receive it, tell me how I can get it to you." 2 days passed without a response. Then, mid-morning, he received a message. "Leave it under the park bench. I'll come back for it." He did just that. That same afternoon, without Alma knowing, he went to the park and left the envelope inside a small plastic bag, hidden under the bench where she had slept so many nights. No one was watching, or at least he thought so. The next morning, Alma left her room earlier than usual. She sat down for breakfast and, for the first time, spoke without him prompting her. "Did you give it to her already?" Thomas looked at her in surprise. "How did you know?" "Because you can't lie," she replied without looking up. "And because last night I dreamed of her." Thomas smiled. "And what did you dream?" "That she read my letter. And that she cried." "Why did she cry?" "Because she missed me. And because she realized I didn't hate her." That day, Alma smiled a little more. Not because the pain had disappeared, but because, finally, someone had listened. And on the other side of the city, in a discreet corner of the park, Valerie, with trembling hands, unfolded a sheet written with clumsy but firm letters. She read it under the shade of the tree where she once left her daughter. And she cried, just like in Alma's dream. Part 11. A home rebuilt, meaningful ending. Autumn began to paint the streets of Portland with ochre and orange hues. Dry leaves crunched under Thomas and Alma's shoes as they walked back from the market. It was a new, almost domestic routine that had formed in silence. They bought bread, fruits, and sometimes a sweet treat to share. Alma no longer feared going out or avoided the gaze of others. She walked beside Thomas, not behind him, and that said a lot. That afternoon, upon arriving home, she found an envelope in the mail slot. It had no sender, just her name, Alma. Thomas took it carefully and brought it inside. Alma watched him with curiosity. "It's for you," he said, handing it to her. Alma slowly opened it, took out a handwritten sheet, and recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from her mother. The child said nothing as she read. Her eyes moved quickly, but her hands trembled. When she finished, she folded it again and remained silent. "Do you want to tell me what it says?" Thomas asked softly. "It says she loves me, that she never left me because she didn't want me, but because she was scared, and that if I want, she can come to see me." Thomas nodded calmly. "How do you feel?" Alma looked down. "I don't know. I want to see her, but I'm also scared. What if I don't know what to say?" "You don't have to say anything you don't want to. Just be." Sometimes, just being there is enough. That night, Alma didn't sleep. She sat by the window with her teddy bear in her arms, looking at the city lights. When dawn broke, she made a decision. I want to see her. Thomas hugged her without saying a word. He knew that moment would mark a before and after. They organized the meeting carefully. No parks this time. They would do it at home in a quiet environment. Thomas cooked something simple. Sarah was also present, in case emotions became too intense. Everything was ready. When the doorbell rang, Alma hid behind the hallway door. Not out of cowardice, but nerves. Thomas opened it. Valerie was there, thinner, her face tired, but her eyes full of determination. Is she okay? Was the first thing she asked. She's waiting in her room. Valerie entered with slow steps. Every object in the house seemed to startle her. When she reached the door frame, she stopped. Alma was sitting on the bed with the letter in her hands. She looked up. Their eyes met. Hello, Alma, Valerie said, her voice trembling. The child didn't respond. She slowly stood up. She walked towards her. They stood face to face, mother and daughter, two wounded souls, facing the moment they had both dreamed of for years. Valerie began to cry. Forgive me, she murmured. For not being there, for not protecting you, for everything. Alma looked at her in silence. Then she took a step forward and hugged her. She didn't say, I forgive you. She didn't say, I love you. There was no need. Her hug was the answer. Thomas watched from the doorway, his heart aching. He knew that moment wouldn't erase the past, but it could heal the present. And in that small, finally warm room, 3 broken lives began to mend, stitch by stitch, with threads of love, fear, and hope. 3 years passed. Thomas's house was no longer silent or tidy as before. Now there was laughter, shouts, dirty dishes in the sink, and drawings stuck on the fridge. Alma had grown. She was 10 years old, with longer hair and a laugh that filled every corner. She no longer slept clutching her teddy bear every night, though she still kept it lovingly on a shelf next to the storybooks she used to read with Thomas. Valerie had moved to a small apartment near them. She still grappled with the ghosts of her past, but she went to therapy, worked as a seamstress, and, most importantly, was present. Not every day was easy. Sometimes Alma would get angry with her for no clear reason. Other times she would hug her without explanation. But both had learned to navigate uncertainty without breaking. Thomas, for his part, had left the company. He handed over his position to a trusted partner and dedicated himself to a simpler life. He discovered he liked to cook, help with schoolwork, and go for aimless walks with Alma on weekends. They never explicitly called each other father and daughter, but the bond between them was firm, unbreakable. One Sunday afternoon, while Valerie was making coffee in the kitchen and Alma was drawing in the living room, Thomas organized some old papers and found the letter. That crumpled letter, ink smudged with tears, written with desperation and love by Valerie, the same one Alma had read and kept like a treasure for so long. He took it in his hands and brought it to the child. Look what I found. Alma smiled when she saw it. I thought I'd lost it. She opened it carefully, as if it were an ancient secret. She read the words, though she already knew them by heart. Then, in a calm voice, she said, Can I write another one? Another letter to your mom? No, to myself, she replied. As if I were that child from before. I want to tell her that everything is okay now, that we survived. Thomas was moved. I think that's a beautiful idea. Alma found paper and a pencil. She sat by the window, where the afternoon light streamed in, and began to write calmly, as if each word closed a wound. Dear Alma, I know you were scared. I know your chest hurts at night, and you don't understand why. But I want to tell you that everything will change. That there are good people even when it seems like there aren't. One day you will stop looking towards the door waiting for her to come back. Because you will discover that you are no longer alone. They will hug you, they will listen to you. And you, though you may not believe it, will smile again. With love from the Alma who no longer sleeps on benches. When she finished, she folded it carefully and put it in a box next to her mother's letter. Then she went to sit between Thomas and Valerie on the sofa. None of the three said anything. There was no need. The silence this time was peace. And on that last page, written without resentment, a cycle of abandonment and pain closed. And a new story opened, unhurriedly, full of second chances. Did this story touch your heart as much as it touched us telling it? Have you ever felt that a letter, a word, or a person changed the course of your life? Tell us below. Don't forget to leave a like if this story moved you, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that there are always second chances, even when all seems lost. And if you like stories full of real emotions, unexpected reunions, and healing endings, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. We want to know, where are you watching this video from? Read us in the comments.